But yeah, I recognise some of those faces. Awesome. So I'm MC. I'm a roller derby official. I've been officiating for about 11 years now, mostly in the north of England, but all over really. Over the years, I've just done just about every role in roller derby you could think of. But what I've done most of all is IPRing and head reffing, and I've done a lot of training as well. I've been running a ref school for about the last 6-7 years now. Every winter, initially in Sheffield, then York, then Leeds. Done it for Durham as well, and some other bits of training. Like we had a boot camp in Leeds a few months ago, which is great. Really good attendance at that, and people were so engaged. It's such a nice thing. So I've done loads, but obviously that doesn't mean that I know everything. There's everyone's got different ways of doing things. So I want to come along and talk a bit about things to do with IPRing, and in particular, because I see there was a session the other day on pack work. I was going to talk about some things connected. I'm loving the eyebrow sparks. I was going to particularly talk about things to do with head reffing, and you might be thinking, I'm quite new. I'm not going to head ref anytime soon. Or you might be thinking, I've already done some head reffing. All of that's great. Some of this is going to be useful, I'm sure, whether it's that you're working with head refs, whether it's that you've not got a formal head ref role, but you're sometimes the only ref at practice at your league, or whether it's just us talking about things that work and don't work. So, for instance, Sparks will tell you it's really good to try and put people off by moving your eyebrows, and yeah, awesome. That is excellent. If you can do that during the game to your head ref, they will love you. But yeah, it'd be great to just hear really quickly who everyone is, and what you'd like to get out of today, and where you're from would be good as well. Shall we start with Kat?
Yeah, I've got a noisy dog in the background, so apologies. I'm Catman. Some of you might have kind of heard of me before. I kind of identify as an intermediate sort of adolescent stage ref. I've ref for about 6 years, kind of part-time alongside playing. I definitely don't know as much as I would like to. But I'm from Arcadia Roller Derby in Manchester. A question kind of I have loaded in my mind is that I am terrible at pack reffing, and I'm reminded of this regularly, in terms of my 10-foot definitions and 20-foot, I'm always calling it too short. So I would like, and I know some of it's just practice, but I would really appreciate any other pointers anyone can recommend, or just reassurance in terms of my pack definition, because I know I'm likely to be head reffing again, and I'm probably the lead official / also a skater in my team, so that would be most helpful, and lovely to see everyone. Thank you, Mickey, for running this.
Awesome. And how about Kia?
Yeah, I'm quite a new ref. I have been very lucky to have people like MC and Beard and Whoop and so many other people help me. I went to Mickey's boot camp, which was amazing, especially to see that many zebras all in one room. I think you kind of used to seeing the NSOs because there's always so many of them, but zebras, it seems to be like there seems to be a bit of a shortage, but it seems to be a shortage of everything at the moment. I'm MRD. I've worked with Catman a few times now, and she is an amazing freaking head ref. So, yeah. But I kind of want to get as much as I can out of all these. I don't think I'd ever be a head ref, but I think there's lots that you can learn from it. So I like the idea of learning more about pack, learning more about the other roles, because you need to know what everyone does, even if you're not going to do that role. So yeah, I'm here for that.
Awesome. And the next person brave enough to put their camera on is Sherry.
Oh no. I'm Sherry. I'm an official with Leeds as well. So I can't actually remember when I started NSOing, but I've been reffing for about 3 or 4 years now. Mostly, I think I'm going to be IPRing for a while because currently my lungs hate me. COVID has not been kind.
Oh, and thanks, Slay, for putting something in the chat as well. If anyone doesn't fancy putting the mic and camera on, feel free to just put something in the chat like that. But I'm going to pick on Sparks next. Anyone know who this is? Yeah.
Really easier to ask people if anyone doesn't know who I am. I'm an experienced roller derby official. We'll just leave it at that.
Awesome, cheers. And then we've got Sashay Away.
Hi, I'm Sashay Away, or Dave, from Hull's Angels. Relatively new referee. I've tried to do most of the roles. Just wanting to learn more.
Brilliant. And then we've got Slay in the chat has put that they're pretty new, a couple of years. Right now they're in Minnesota, USA, just trying to get as much knowledge from everywhere so they can gain confidence, which sounds excellent. And then Twixie from Southampton, used to ref but can't skate anymore, still ends up training new referees from time to time, so likes to pop in and pick up what they can. These days they tend to NSO. Fantastic. If anyone else wants to jump on the mic and tell us who they are, that's great. Or if you want to put it in the chat, that'd be awesome. Basil, hi. Have you come on camera because you want to tell us who you are, Basil?
Nope, let's put that off.
Excellent. We've got a few other people who posted up now as well. Great. So we've got Mr. Bruise Guy, an official from Circle City Roller Derby and a coach from Indianapolis Junior Roller Derby, trying to get as much as they can out of this to pass on to their organisations. David, who has a broken mic, very convenient. Yep. At present, thinking of volunteering to become an NSRF. Awesome. So observing the videos. Great. So that's great. Looks like we've got a real range of people on here, which is fantastic. We've got people who've reffed in the past and don't at the moment. We've got people who are thinking of reffing, people who are starting out, and people who've got a lot or a fair bit of experience. So hopefully we're going to have a really good session here. So originally I said I'd do this session about some sort of position and thought maybe IPR, because I do more of that than any other position. And there's lots of different aspects to IPRing. And obviously, a big part of it is being able to look at the pack, do the pack work, something that you do vastly more of as an IPR than any other position. In any other position, hopefully you don't have to pay too much attention to the pack, and the IPRs will be telling you where the pack is. So I know there was a session the other day on the packs. I don't want to talk about that too much, but just, I know you brought it up, Kat, that it is it can be feel like quite a big thing. Everyone messes up the pack sometimes. No one is perfect, but the more you do, the better you get at it. If you can have a go somewhere with 10-foot markers down, I find that really helpful for calibrating. If I'm looking at the distances and I start to feel like, am I really getting the distances right here? Am I being too generous, too tight on it? Then I can look down at those 10-foot markers and see how it compares. Obviously, that does. Hi there. Obviously, that does rely on the markers being right. So it's worth having a quick glance at the start of the game to make sure they actually are 10 foot apart.
Yeah. Tori suggested to me, because I laid some 10-foot markers and everyone was challenging me, is measuring something 10 foot apart in your house. Which I thought, I haven't done it yet, but I will try that, and like measuring, okay, that's one end of the sofa to the other, one lampshade to that thing, and practicing that. So I'm going to try that. I've heard some other tips as well, but I definitely need to get better at it.
The other tip I'd definitely have for pack work is, if you see a gap opening up, if you see that 7 foot, 8 foot gap opening up, and you think this could end up being 10 foot, trying to think about where will the pack be if that gets to 10 foot. And then you can look really prepared and ready if that does happen. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe they'll come back together and you don't have to worry about it. But if it does get to 10 foot, you're on it already. You don't have to make, because a lot of the times if you look at things online, where's the pack? Here's a diagram. Well, it doesn't, for a start, it's a bit of a diagram. It doesn't really look the way it will on track. But also they're asking you to make a snap decision based on what you're seeing right that second. And if you can prepare, if you can spot those gaps opening up, you're very rarely going to need to make a snap decision. Just that one time when someone unexpectedly falls over in the middle of the pack who's trying to bridge. But generally, that I find that helps a lot. So the reason why I thought I'd start off with talking about a bit of pack there, talking about IPR stuff, and maybe move on to head reffing, is because you might well combine the two roles. If you're going to be head ref, then according to the rules, you need to be an IPR. It used to be you could be a jam ref, and it was awful. Don't try and do it. I did it once. I got to the game. It was double header. We had the first game, and I was head ref, and seemed to go okay. And then the second game, one of the jam refs said, "Oh, actually, I'm playing in this next one," and so I asked around to ask the other officials, anyone else able to jam ref? Nope, no one's ever jam ref. No one fancies doing that. Anyone could step in as head ref? Nope. Okay. So I did head ref and jam ref, and it was a real mess because as jam ref, you're focusing principally on your jammer, what's happening immediately around them. I couldn't tell you what the other officials were doing. I couldn't tell you whether the pack definition was spot on or not. I couldn't tell you whether the OPRs were in position, except when they were following my jammer. So, because as head ref, you want to be able to keep a bit of an overview of what the other officials are doing. Are they in position? If you see them make a call, is it clear? Is it loud? Are they communicating well? Is the skater actually going to the box? If you have a really good view of something and someone else calls it, do you think it's a plausible call that they've made? You've not necessarily seen it the exact same way. Just because you didn't see enough to call a penalty doesn't mean that they were wrong to call it. But if it's a front IPR who's 20 foot in the front of the pack who's called a back block, then did they really see that? It's unlikely. Not completely impossible.
Yeah, I've been called out on that, on calling a back block in a front IPR position. But it was clear as day. Like, you can see if someone hits the middle of the spine. I was right in that line of view, and I had someone give quite a bit of grief on that. So yes, it is possible, but it is going to be a bit tough sometimes. But yeah, sorry, just had to put that bit in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's there is that really rare occasion when you do actually see a back block stood right at the front, or something that people wouldn't expect you to see, when actually you've got a really clear view of that cut on the outside when you're still on the inside. But I wouldn't expect someone to be making a lot of calls like that. If they keep making those calls all through the game, I'll be thinking there's something odd going on here. Are they maybe calling things that they haven't seen?
Witchcraft.
Yeah, I mean, if they've got extra skills like that, so much the better. But so some people really like head reffing. I like head reffing, but a lot of people end up doing it because no one really wants to do it. And particularly if you've done a bit of IPRing, if you feel fairly confident with the basics of what you do as an IPR, then you're bound to get asked to head ref at some point. And even if you don't really, you'll probably find at some point you'll be the only ref at practice, or you'll turn up to some sort of casual scrim and you'll be the most experienced official there. And people will be asking you, will you head ref this one? So I was just going to go through the sort of things you might think about as a head ref. And the first thing you might think about as a head ref is who's on your crew. So maybe you don't get any choice in the matter. Maybe you turned up on the day and it's whoever's at the scrim and they're your crew. But maybe you get a chance to build your crew a bit in advance. And if so, fantastic. So, get out there, advertise it, talk to people. if it's a really big event, then you probably want to put a form together, advertise it all over the place. If it's just a scrim that you know about in advance, then at the very least, I would suggest post up on Facebook or some other similar place that local officials can see that you've got an event going on and you'd like them to come and help you out with it, because you really don't want to be the only person there. You'd really like a crew of 7 people if possible. And if of course we can go ahead with games with fewer than 7 officials. I bet you've all done some of them. Fewer than 7 refs. Fewer than 7 officials starts getting very heavy. Yeah, fewer than 7 refs. We can do. Yeah, 3 refs. You can have a game with 3 refs. Yep, I wouldn't recommend it. If you have a game with 3 refs, 2 of them are going to be jam refs. You, as head ref, are going to be the only person who's really focused on the pack. Yes, you can ask the jam refs to try and help you out a bit with stuff that's happening in the pack, but they've got plenty to do following their jammers. And if you're in that situation, they're probably not the most experienced jam ref. They're probably going to have enough to do getting the jam reffing right. So a lot of the time we're a bit short of people applying for events. Sometimes we might be in a really lucky position that we've got enough people, or we've even got too many people. So, if you've got too many people, fantastic. But then we can think about who to prioritise, who do we want to put in for the event, and don't just automatically put in the most experienced people. That's not necessarily what you want. Maybe it is. Maybe you're crewing a really high level game with very high, expectations from the teams of how it's going to go. And you do want to make sure everyone's got a lot of experience. Even then, it might not necessarily be the most experienced people who've applied who you automatically select. But you want to make sure that the crew you pick is going to be able to cope with the kind of level of play you're expecting. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
So yes, you want, if at all possible, to have a crew that you think is going to be able to cope with that level of gameplay. But beyond that, once you're happy that people are going to be able to cope, then you can think about, well, what else do I want to do with the crew? Do I want to use it as a good development opportunity for people? You might have people applying who've not previously ref something at that level, but it could be a good opportunity for them to have a go at it. You might have someone who's who can't get to that many games. Some people seem to have vast budgets and they're able to travel to events all over Europe, all over the States. Fantastic, good for them. But maybe then if I'm crewing the local game in Leeds, I'm thinking about, well, are there some local officials who I know do struggle to get to so many games, and this might be their only opportunity to ref a reasonably high level team. And it's also worth thinking about the diversity of your crew as well. We've historically, reffing was incredibly male. If you go back 10 years ago, just about every ref in the UK was male. Things aren't quite as bad as that now, but still, if you look at some high level events, they can be very male. Also, roller derby as a whole tends to be very white. Reffing, I would say, even more so. So, are the people who aren't applying, why aren't they applying? It's a good opportunity to ask them, maybe they'd like to apply, make it clear on any application that you'd welcome them to apply. Or is it maybe something about the events that's putting them off applying? It's worth thinking about. If you're a bloke setting it up when you've got a really blokey atmosphere, maybe that's putting some people off applying. Maybe you need to think about how you can be inclusive. Is that a hand up, Tom?
Yeah, so it was just kind of going on what you were saying there. So one of the things I always try to do when organising games and head reffing stuff is very much like, if you're travelling a fair distance, you tend to get priority. But as you were saying with the diversity side of things, it also helps if you make your expectations clear that to people who are coming to your games, and look, this is going to be an inclusive environment. Like the same with when you have the captains talks, it's setting those boundaries down to say, this is how we're going to do things, and these things are going to be done to make sure everyone is safe and everyone is happy. It's very much also using the inclusive language. So one of the things I always say for a game is we are always using they, them as the pronouns. we'll get everyone's pronouns, but primarily we'll use they, them, because then it's accepted for everyone. And also making it clear that if you do make a mistake, you apologise, you've got a chance again. If it becomes a habit, then you have to kind of make that decision, say, sorry, you can't continue to officiate with us, kind of thing.
And Kat, you've got your hand up.
I do. It's a virtual hand. So two things. So firstly, it sounds like from what you're saying, as well as kind of guidance I've had before, is that the role of head ref or kind of IPR is quite a lot kind of supervisory and support. So you're not just kind of just watching pack, you're kind of being mindful of the team you're working with and kind of, the experience levels and supporting others. The second kind of thing, I mean, you might come to later anyway, in which case please tell me to shut up and I'll ask it later. But in terms of kind of that inclusivity aspect, and especially encouraging new officials in, which I'm sure every league is trying to do, how do you support, I've got some ideas already, but how might you support particularly referees, but also NSOs, from that, if they feel comfortable with shadow reffing, helping them to make that jump to OPR or kind of other officiating roles, even if like the reffing, off skates, because you might believe, I think you can do this, but in terms of that, it's instilling that confidence. I appreciate that's not very articulate, but yeah.
No, I think that's really, it's a really good question. I've definitely got some thoughts on it. Hopefully some other people have as well. So I would say it's not necessarily something you can do a lot about on game day. You've got the crew you've got by that point. So what can you do in advance? Can you do stuff at the stage of people applying? Can you do stuff in your league more generally? One thing you mentioned was about the idea of new people doing OPR, which maybe that's the position for them, but don't assume that people's necessarily best off starting out as OPR. OPR is a really skilled position. Certainly benefits some people with good skating skills. People with a good understanding of game flow. Those can be challenging things to pick up. If someone, is keen, has been at practice, but perhaps hasn't got the strongest skating skills, I might think about starting them out as an IPR instead. If someone is perhaps doesn't have quite as much understanding of the full rule sets, then sometimes it might work out for them to start off having a go at jam reffing, where they can really focus on their jammer. There's challenges in all the positions. None of them are an easy position where you can do stuff perfectly on your first time out or your 100th time out.
Thank you.
Has anyone else got any thoughts on how to sort of instill a bit of confidence? Yeah, Tom.
So one of the things that we do, particularly I had on the last open door game I had for Portsmouth, we had 2 rookie refs. One of them, it was their first open door in total. Second one, they hadn't really ref for a couple of years, and what I did is I asked them what position they wanted, and to kind of make sure that they were comfortable with what they were doing. So for one of them, they said that they only want to do rear OPR, which is fine. So they got to do that 2 games. The other one had only a really experienced jam ref. So again, like you said, pair them in, put them in with the jam ref position as they asked, and then we had one of our other guys. He's we had a very experienced crew that day, so we were able to swap people around. One of the people that I paired him up with is a very experienced jam ref, so any questions they had kind of flowed around, and whoever was the IPRs, we made sure communication was clear for them. It's very much a case of making sure that you communicate with them and you help them feel safe and comfortable doing the positions they're doing. So for the first game, because it was the serious game of the day and I had 8 refs, which was a shocker to start things off, I put them in the alt position so they could watch the experienced crew, how they dealt with it, and then they got to do the more fun game as the second point, but they had the support all the way. So I then went into the alt position so I could watch them and help them out. Also helps if you bring food and give them cards and say thank you for choosing us and coming and do it. But yeah, you've got options, and as long as you're showing support for the crew that you've got on all official levels, NSOing and skating, then that generally makes things flow quite easy. And one of the main things that we do is we make it quite clear that, at least what I do, is when it comes to the way that the teams are done, the benches and captains get the forewarning that any kind of aggressive behaviour towards officials, especially learning ones or new ones, the line is set. That doesn't happen. I had to tell the bench crew off in the last game, the last open door, because it was literally, they got aggressive, they started blaming the refs for their players getting penalties. And it's like, that's not how this works. You protect your people, they want to come back, they want to continue learning. And I think that's how I personally prefer to handle it.
I think some great ideas there, and I'm seeing some great stuff in the chat as well. Probably not going to manage to cover absolutely everything in the chat, but absolutely. Cherry Fury was around 10, 12 years ago and was doing a great job. But there were very much male refs in general. I think one thing I've just seen pop up in the chat here is, staffing new officials as shadows to more veteran officials. Yep. So shadows, or just pairing people up in their positions. If you've got a new OPR, don't have three new OPRs all on together. I really frustrates me that some people sometimes go, OPR, that's the position for newbies. I put all the experienced people in the middle, all the OPRs will be new. Then they're going to struggle. They're not going to learn anything as well if they're all new together, and that's not the way to give people confidence. If you've got one thing that I've liked doing is when there's someone who's new to head reffing, is putting in someone who's a really experienced IPR to work with them. And typically, as head ref, usually you'll be rear IPR. Some people like to IPR from the front as head ref, which is absolutely fine if that's what works for them. Definitely pairing people is such a good idea. And the talk about putting people in as alt refs as well.
It's a good idea. Putting people in as alt refs as well.
Basil, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something, or have I talked through that bit?
My laptop's having a little bit of a moment. I think I definitely agree with the shadowing discussions, but I think one thing that I don't see many leagues do, which I think is really helpful, is to get a learnings official to do the job and have somebody experienced shadow them. And that way they've got that safety net right behind them. I think especially for IPR positions or JAMREF positions, where they can turn around and say, was that a this? Was that a this? Should I issue this penalty? Because I think it's very easy to watch somebody do something, and then when you get thrown into it, if you haven't got that safety net, you can feel a little bit unsupported.
I think one thing that I think a lot of officials don't do, especially when they're starting, is watching footage. I think watching footage is really vital, because you can preempt things, you can see things that are going on, even if it's not your game. And I think that's really, really valuable, like watching Derby, watching footage, go to games as well as the shadowing thing, just try and get as much knowledge as you can yourself and try and kind of pick up on things that other people are calling.
Absolutely. And Sparks with a non-virtual hand.
I just wanted to come from where Basil was then, and I would never have a rookie ref shadow me, for the pure reason is they don't get any benefit from it. It's far better for me as an experienced ref to be off skates shadowing them, giving them the support, because they need to feel confident in the role. So more often than not, when I'm coaching referees, I've not got my skates on and I'm NSOing, because I become a better ref by NSOing and supporting them than being on skates, being shadowed by them.
But just to play devil's advocate there, kind of, what about for brand new people? People have never ever refereed before. Is there still a place for people shadow reffing, and then maybe the second time, they want to shadow, then maybe the second time that they do it, and someone more experienced shadows them? I'm just curious what people's views, or would you say just very first time they do it and we shadow?
So for me, on that point, they can shadow, but it does limit what they can learn. When it comes to those kind of situations, it's best if you've got like practice scrims that continuously happen. So then that way they've got a constant, which I'll cover in my chat next week actually, but it's one of those ones where it's like, if you've got a constant practice, then there is that opportunity for them to watch and you get to help with the observations. But one of the things that I like to do, if there is constant practice, is put them in one position and get them to focus on one penalty. So there is a place to learn, and you start from one penalty and then build it up. Once they've kind of got the hang of that one penalty, you can add more. That's where I go on that one when I train refs.
I've heard that emphasis, particularly with OPRs as well, in terms of sort of building confidence. That okay, you're on the outside, you don't feel as confident. Just look for cuts. Nothing else. Just look for cuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if you don't feel confident, just signal it, and we'll call it.
Yeah, this is the thing that is, I think, makes things quite comfortable. Is like I make sure that they feel that there is no wrong call. If they make a penalty, if they call on a penalty, they've called a penalty. Okay, you can then have that discussion to be like, okay, why did you call the penalty? Because at scrims, you've got that opportunity to have a bigger break in between. So you've got that chance to be able to turn around and say, why did you call the penalty? Tell me what you saw. So then that gives them, I'd say, like the confidence to then explain themselves. So then when it comes to doing official reviews on game days, they've got that ability to then say what they've seen, and it's passed over a lot easier for them. It makes them a lot more comfortable. It makes us a lot more comfortable. And I think it makes them want to stay and do it.
I was going to say that's very interesting, that the fact that you say that you're kind of teaching us to explain it. It was something that I got taught afterwards. I got, tell me why that was a penalty type thing, because that's what you need to be able to do if there's an official review. And so I went backwards, and that's how I think about everything before I call a penalty. If I can explain it, I know it was a penalty. If I can't explain it, then I'm not certain enough to call it. So I found that very interesting, that process of actually having to explain what you just saw and why it was a penalty.
Well, the kind of thing that, like, when I started off, I was thrown into a game. It was a closed door scrim, and I was literally like, they were short a ref because the guy who was going to be reffing ended up being asked to be benched. So I was thrown into a game, and it was very much a case of I had Beard, I had Scrim, and I had Jez. I don't know if anybody remembers Jez from like Portsmouth area, but like I had those three, and they just and I had Chief, and they said to me, when like, just call one penalty. If you see one penalty, that's it, just call it. Like, don't worry about it. You've got an experienced crew around you. You don't have to worry about, I called one cut, the entire thing. And they said like, okay, so what did you see? And then I explained what I saw, and that's how the process went through it. Yeah. I have adapted it and grown it a bit more in my time as a head ref. But yeah, it's very much like if you call it and then you can explain it, then it gives you the confidence to actually keep on calling it. If you have to spend too much time thinking about it and wondering if you should call it, then you're never going to call a penalty.
Yeah, I kind of got thrown in like you did, to be fair. I shadow refed one game and then I was a ref.
And then you fell in love with it.
Well, half of it's Mickey's fault, so,
Oh, you're the one to blame for all of this.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always encouraging people to have a go at reffing particularly if they express any interest at all in the idea.
I blame you too.
Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about encouraging people to have a go at reffing, trying to instill a bit of confidence, which is great. So say you're the head ref for a particular game, you've got your crew together. ideally, you've planned it out a bit in advance. The earlier you can advertise these things, the better. We needed 2
Hang
full
on,
crews.
plan these things.
The more planning you can do, the better. A lot of leagues do decide last minute they're going to have some sort of scrim, or even worse, a full game with high expectations, and expect us to magically find officials at the last second.
When there's a million clashes that weekend.
Yeah.
They still think that they're going to get an amazing crew.
Yep. I mean, there's only so much you can do about that. Talk to the league, and the people organising the games about what's realistic, what they can expect, and make sure they keep talking to you about what they're organising. But some people are better at doing that than others. But let's say you've got your crew, you've managed to put a crew together. Keep in touch with them in advance of the game, because there will be someone who has a problem, someone who gets ill, someone who decides that they want to go to a different event instead. Sparks always gets amazing crews. There you go. Everyone wants to work with Sparks.
I've been on his crew, blooming heck.
And also, if you keep the communication going, people can ask those questions about, I've never been to that venue. What's the floor like? Is there a cafe? How far is it from the station? Whatever they comes to mind, you can remind people. I always try and remind people the night before that the game's happening, because I've had it happen before that I've done that reminder the day before, and I've had an official go, tomorrow? God, I think I can make it, but I forgot all about it. So
that's how
I'd much rather know in advance if they can't come.
I met Sasha away the other weekend because they lost a few refs, and me and Derbs were there, and I think Megan wasn't supposed to be there, and she was there. We all got asked the night before, so it's like there's a silver lining, because I got to meet Sasha away. It's like I got to go somewhere different. It was really nice, but it literally was the night before, like 7:30 the night before. So yeah,
was that the Wakefield one?
Yeah. I was supposed to be working the next day. I got all my work done though, but yeah.
Do you know what? There's the quadruple header in Leeds, and I today agreed to do the Liverpool game the day after.
Oh, geez,
and
okay.
And then realised that it was the same weekend. I'll do it, pick me. Oh.
That was a mistake. Like, I find doing a double header, I'm like, I am done with people for the next month.
So there's also some really important people that I want to be talking to in advance and on the day. So one of them is the head NSO, and it's really important. If you're head reffing, you want a good working relationship with the head NSO, and I want to know who the head NSO is. How do they like to work? Are they experienced? Are they brand new to it? Are they going to, are they really experienced and they're going to be helping me out loads? Fantastic. Are they really new and they're going to want lots of support? That's fine, but I'd like to know in advance. I also want to know who from the team is responsible for organising the game day, because sometimes things go wrong on the day, and some of those things I can help sort out, but some of them really aren't within my role as head ref. If there's a leak in the roof, well, I can stop the game, but I don't know I'm not going to get in touch with the building people to find a bucket, find mops. I've been at events where every conceivable issue you could imagine has happened at some point, and you need to know who from the team is going to take a lead. League is going to take a lead on sorting out those problems, because I don't want to be in the middle of the game. Right, call a timeout. We've got some serious issue here, and no one is dealing with it. No one knows who's going to deal with it. I want to be able to say, okay, this person is who's going to go and deal with it, and maybe that means we can get on with the game. And even if we can't get on with the game, at least we can keep the communication going, and we can have stuff being resolved as quickly as possible. When I get there on the day, so if I don't know the venue, I'm going to want to have a bit of a look. What's the setup? Where are things? I want to get there in plenty of time, obviously, and I want to see who's arriving. I want to see the officials arriving, try and say hello to them as they arrive. That way I can see that people are actually there, that they've turned up. I can send urgent messages if people aren't there. Where are you? Oh, your car broke down. Okay, right. We'll start without you. And I want to speak to, obviously, the head NSO again, speak to the team liaison. I always try and have a word with the medics as well. Are they there? Do they know what roller derby is? Have they ever been medics at a roller derby game before? If not, I can run through, this is what your role's going to be. Don't run on track in the middle of a jam. We might ask you to do some concussion checks on skaters. We might have skaters come over to you. We need to have at least one of you watching the track whenever the game's on. If you both need to deal with someone, that's fine, but we won't be able to continue playing until one of you's got your eyes back on the track again. And if I get a chance, it's also really helpful to know who's announcing the game, speak with them. They might want to come in when we're having official reviews. They might want information about what's going on. It's really helpful for the crowd if we're having a chat about something, if they can fill the crowd in on what it's about in an appropriate way. So I want to know that all that's in place. And then we're going to have the officials and the captains' meetings. And which one of those are we going to have first?
Is that a trick question?
Captain's meeting.
Yep.
Why?
Because you need to know
bring anything, any concerns to the refs.
Yep.
Like hard-of-hearing skaters.
It's so much easier.
They're all hard of hearing.
If you have the captain's meeting first and then things come out of the captain's meeting, you can pass them on to officials in the officials meeting. Absolutely. So the captain's meeting, if you've got a day full of multiple games with different teams, you might not be able to get them all in the same captain's meeting. It's obviously convenient for us as officials if we can get them all together, but it's not realistic to ask a team to turn up 2 hours early just because it's handy for us. So you might have to have several scheduled through the day if it's a multi-game day. But ideally, you can do these all well in advance. Try and do it before the teams will start their warm-up, because the captain would really like to be in the warm-up. And there's loads of things we could cover in a captain's meeting, and sometimes officials decide that they'd like to cover all of them. And the captain's meeting drags on and on and on, and everyone wishes they weren't there. So it's worth thinking about what do you actually need to cover in this particular captain's meeting. There's a few things that you're always going to want to cover. So something the head NSO will usually take a lead on is checking the rosters. Which of these skaters on the roster are actually here today and going to be playing. Should be checking the helmet covers and make sure that they've got appropriate sets of helmet covers at high contrast, that we're actually going to be able to see what's going on. Should always be doing that. And then I've got a list of things. I've written down a list of various things that I might cover in captain's meetings, but whether I do or not depends a bit on the event. So, for instance, sometimes I might talk about a recent change to the rules if there's been something that I think is an important change that might affect how we officiate the game. But if the last change was 6 months ago, chances everyone will know about that. I don't need to give everyone a lecture on it. Sometimes we might have some slight changes to how the game works. At our practice venue in Leeds, we've got very narrow OPR lanes. And so I'll usually mention something about that, about how it might affect how the OPRs work, about what happens if someone tries to prop themselves up on track by holding onto the wall and claiming that they're still in bounds. So can set expectations around things that you think might be likely to come up. You can set expectations around how the sort of behaviour that we're expecting. If you think that might be a useful thing to do, how do you want them, the teams, to communicate with officials? If you think that it would be helpful to set that out, it often can be very helpful to set it out. Set some expectations. You might need to talk about timings if there've been changes to timings. If the timings that were sent in advance are going to have to be altered, then I'd always mention that. But don't try and cover every single thing you might want to talk about with the teams in the meeting. Think about what actually needs to be covered and give them a chance to ask questions as well. Sometimes captains, or more often benches, will have some quite specific questions about the rules and how we might call a particular situation. And if they do, then it's up to you how you want to answer it. Sometimes it's a really straightforward answer, and I can just give them that straightforward answer. Other times, the answer might be, we'll be calling it as it says in the rules. I can show you the bit in the rules if you like. I can show you the exact wording, and we'll be doing that.
The best question is what's your metric on this penalty? You've done a bad, you have a penalty. But what's your metric? The same as everyone else's.
Yeah. So, don't feel you have to rack your brains to give an incredibly detailed answer to those questions. But if it's an easy answer, give them an easy answer. Yeah. If they ask, well, what happens if one of the jammers false starts? Well, I can tell them what will happen, because the same thing happens every game if the jammer false starts.
One of the recent times I had a go at head reffing, I went and checked in with both teams, and I went to one team and a skater I know fairly well, and I said, "Oh, have you got any feedback, any questions?" And one was like, "Oh, why am I getting so many directions?" Like, because that's just the skater you are, Dusty. That's just that's just the skater you are. But yeah, I couldn't give more detailed feedback.
I think something that I've dealt with recently is I've reffed a team that I know quite well recently, and the bench came up to me mid-game going, "I have some feedback for you." So I was crew head, and it was like, okay, so you probably think that's appropriate, and that's fine, but it was feedback from the other crew. So I was crew head for one crew, and they'd been reffed by the other crew, so they wanted to give me feedback about the other crew, kind of in between games, and I just kind of fobbed them off a bit, and it was just like, okay.
No.
But because they know me, it was like, oh, can I just have a quick chat? And it's like, well, first of all, wrong crew. Second of all, I don't quite know what you want me to do with this feedback. So
yeah.
One of my favourites was a recent game, and it said like, when one of your refs gives a penalty, it seems more like they're questioning rather than giving a penalty. It's like, are they pointing at your skater and doing hand signals? Yes, then they have a penalty. They should get off. This isn't a question. Like, this isn't feedback. Your skater knows that they're pointing at them. They know that they're getting the instruction. Just get them off track, please.
I'm starting to feel like I need to. I put it in the document that I did, but kind of I'm starting to feel like I need to accentuate that you must respect the referees. Don't question them or challenge them unless it's in a respectful, constructive, and appropriate way. Like Stewie has said, like it probably wasn't appropriate for you, and just Sorry, Sparks has got some feedback. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'd just be very mindful that when you say command respect, I think you're far better off earning it by having discussions with the teams involved and being approachable, and that'll earn you the respect rather than making a point of kind of demanding a respect.
I think, I'm not as experienced as you guys, but we did have one not that long ago that we were talking about in one of these other sessions, and this guy was not going to give anyone respect, whether we earned it or not. I think he's banned now, which is good, but I think there's certain people that I got quite disrespected in front of the newbies at my own team from someone that I just don't think really likes me. So it's like, it wouldn't matter what I did, I could not earn respect from that guy. So it's like, I get what you're saying, but I think sometimes they need to be reminded that we're there to help, we're there for a reason, we're doing our job, and that they need to not shout at us for no reason and make the head ref cry. It's like there was.
But then being that better person, And
yeah,
I mean, because I know I've been in situations where it's been really difficult, but just being that better person and just kind of not letting it is hard. But I know I've done games and kept my head and then gone home and been upset.
The head ref was amazing. The head ref handled it absolutely brilliantly. But as a newbie ref, I just looked over. I luckily was not reffing that game, but I looked over and I thought, I never want to deal with this team. I'm not here for this.
Yeah.
And I think, there's never any doubt that the referee team that anyone's working with will be appropriate, respectful, and will earn that and will show that respect. I don't think there's any doubt of that. I think it's, perhaps sometimes if the skaters are new, and particularly, when I've been watching like football referees or American football referees, I've been watching some amateur stuff, or like, particularly when we're thinking about trying to encourage new officials to give the role a go, sometimes that kind of bad attitude or kind of, getting some skaters kind of get a bit angry towards the referees can be really impactful. And it's trying to encourage that safe space that we were talking about, that encouraging the officials that, you are safe and you will not be kind of disrespected or challenged or made to feel that you shouldn't be here. So I think it's I'm conscious of that, trying to encourage our newer officials that, you have a right to be here. Any kind of, verbal abuse or kind of being made to feel uncomfortable isn't acceptable, and you have a right to challenge that. You're not here to be shouted at. I think that's what I'm conscious of as well.
So the way I kind of view it is, I like watching rugby. The way refs are treated in rugby is a good basis for most officiating, in my personal view. You can challenge the ref, you can talk to the ref. Generally speaking, it should only be the captain or it should be the bench. They should be the only people who can do that. And I fully accept that people get passionate about the sport, and I fully expect some people to either go up to the line or step over it every now and then. But as long as that conversation is then had and they step back into like that space, because we're there to make sure people are safe. We're there to make sure everyone enjoys the sport. And one thing I like to say in a captain's meeting is, if I'm not enjoying it as much as you guys are, something's gone wrong. And you see with a lot of, officials, especially in like rugby, they're enjoying themselves while doing the sport. I enjoy myself while doing the sport. That's why I carried on doing it. That's why I've stayed as head ref for my league for so many years now. It's, I like the sport. I like the atmosphere. I like what it does. And that needs to be conveyed through the players as well as the officials. Now, don't get me wrong, there are officials who are dickish to other officials. Like I've had skaters who, if they lived closer to where I was, they'd come down to my place to learn to ref, because the only refs they've got around their area are very derogatory or aggressive, so they don't want to learn from them, which again hampers the sport that we've got. And it's trying to make sure that, yes, there is passion, but it's done in the right way.
So I think sometimes there can be different understandings of what respect means as well. There's a fundamental level of respect which everyone should have for all participants in the sport. People should have in general. That people shouldn't be telling someone, insulting someone. Someone shouldn't be screaming in their face. Someone shouldn't be treating them differently because of their gender or ethnicity or whatever. And that's the sort of basic type of respect is an expectation. And occasionally I felt the need to set that out in a captain's meeting, because I'm concerned, given my knowledge of the bench or of the team, that it may not happen. But there's also the sort of respect that you might hope you might get during the game where skaters go, oh, that was a good ref crew. They were good refs. They made a call. I wasn't sure if it was right, but I trust them. And I don't expect that necessarily. I don't expect people to come to the game and think I'm a good ref. I want to try and demonstrate that. I want to try and do my best to be a good referee, and hopefully have them feel that that I did a good job and was calling stuff to the best of my ability.
But yeah, it's always like, I don't want to be praised for the ref job I do. It is nice to have that recognition, but it's not why we do it. It's not why we do it.
I think for me, that kind of recognition and respect, for me, I this is probably just my personal view. I think it should be an automatic thing because I guess, people's skill level, you can't, they don't have a sticker on the head saying I'm this experience level, but I feel automatic respect for any official, regardless of their experience level, because they are doing something to facilitate other people to play the game. And regardless if it's their first scrim or the first game, I would, even if they think, if some skaters feel they've made a mistake, I don't care, because they're refereeing for us. That every official is doing it. Obviously, we have personal gain, but they're doing it so other people can play a game. So I kind of feel like, it doesn't matter to me if they kind of make some mistakes. Obviously, everyone should be respectful. That's, a kind of moral compass, civility rule. But like, I feel like regardless of their sort of skill level or whatever they're doing, as a skater, I feel like they automatically earn my respect because they are officiating for the game. They're facilitating us to play the game, and I'm very grateful for them for doing that. And so I don't care, even if they make a mistake. You know what? Fine, they were having a go, and and they were allowing us. They were providing more referees for the game. So I'm grateful for that. And if they made a mistake, okay, fine. Well, it's making them a better referee. But that is just my personal view.
Don't be a dick is my policy.
That's the policy for life, surely.
Don't be a dick and disrespect deserved.
But I think, when you hear, and I know that this was probably more like back in the day when, think that ref crew was awful. Okay, so there's 7 or 8 refs on that crew. Are they all awful? If 1 or 2 refs in that crew were calling crazy penalties, not doing things right, they would be spoken to, they would be given feedback, and the game would be, so that when you hear that sweeping statement sometimes that you do get from teams, oh, the ref crew was terrible. Really, were they? Or was it just a bad game?
Or were they just unhappy that they got some penalties?
Exactly. Was it just a bad game?
Yeah, so I can pass that back on to the Open game that I did recently, and literally the bench coach for the visiting game, despite winning by 100 points, one of their players fouled out and decided to blame my ref crew for the fact that they fouled out. And it was literally, right. So I stopped the game because he was aggressive about it. And I just said to him, look, you don't blame my crew for your players' conduct on track that gives them a penalty. And I made sure, I even did something, I basically had created my own official review to discuss with my refs that player definitely got their last penalty. And literally, they were getting 1 or 2 penalties. So they were either getting a penalty, and either way they were fouling out. And it's you don't talk to my crew in that manner. Your player fouled out either way. They were fouling out. Them fouling out is what ruined the game for them. That's not on my people. That's not on my crew. That's on the person who caused the penalties.
I saw a comment from a skater a while ago, and it was oh, lol, that penalty you gave me. And I actually commented going, no, that penalty you created.
Yeah, my favourite conversation is always with my wife, who's going to pop up in a minute. But she scrims, so obviously I'm then giving her a penalty, and she goes we'll talk about that one later. And it's yeah, but will we? Because I'm right. You did a bad. But it's a very different attitude to people actively going this is a terrible crew. I shouldn't have got that penalty. It's well, step into reffing, and then you can learn how to call penalties, and then you'll see where we're coming from.
It's always only one person's perspective as well. I got one relatively recently, secondhand, that, and this was based on an entire crew, brought roller derby into disrepute. Every other piece of feedback I got from that event was stellar for the whole crew. I loved the entire event. It was fantastic. But one person felt we were bringing roller derby into disrepute. And I thought that was so funny, I put it in my Twitter bio. Because it's just one person's experience, and that's fine. They're allowed to have that. They're entitled to an opinion. But don't take individual piece of feedback as gospel. get lots of feedback and then see where the consensus is.
So I think we talked quite a bit about difficult relationships with teams and benches, which do sometimes happen, but also captain's meeting is a great chance to build a bit of rapport and, start off on a good footing. And, a good bench can be really helpful in managing their team. They don't, a good bench doesn't want their team to be getting frustrated, getting het up with the officials or with anyone else for that matter. They want them to be focused on playing the game. So it's often really in their interests to work constructively with the officials. Now, that doesn't mean that there's also some benches who like to do a bit of performative being upset for their team, and if they do it in an appropriate way, that can be fine. But it's if it's part of managing their team, then that's not necessarily something I've got an issue with, as long as it's polite and appropriate. But we've had the captain's meeting, so next up we've got the officials meeting. We best get through the day, otherwise we're not going to finish. So officials meeting. Some people like to have separate meetings for referees and NSOs. I like to start with everyone in a meeting together. That way everyone can see each other. They know who they're working with. It's particularly helpful if you've got someone in an NSO role as a referee that you're going to be working with closely. If you're a jam ref, you want to see who your scorekeeper is, for instance. If I'm front IPR, I'm quite keen to know who the jam timer is, because I'm going to be stood very close to them, and I'm going to, for instance, need to coordinate a bit where I'm standing to make sure I'm not in their line of sight when they want to look at the scoreboard. So, I like to start off with everyone there. It's worth thinking about, does everyone know each other? Sometimes they might all know each other. It might be your local league putting on the event, and it's the crew that's worked together plenty of times before. A lot of times there'll be some new people there. Might be a nice thing to go around and do quick introductions. What role are people doing today? What's the name? Maybe, often what are their pronouns is quite a helpful thing to do. And then we can talk about if there are any general things about the day, about the games that everyone who's officiating could do with knowing. Coordinate that with the head NSO who wants to cover what. There might be that there's feedback from the captain's meeting that we've agreed to pass on to officials. Might not be. And then we can split off. After that, I tend to split things off and have separate ref and NSO chats after that. Often there's not all that much to say in the separate ref section. It depends a bit on how experienced people are, how often they've worked together, what expectations they've got of the game. But was that a hand, Tom?
Yeah, just briefly, because with the large officials meeting, I do like to point out that NSOs are empowered. I don't like to have the crews decided as only one guy, only one bunch can do the penalty calling. I like to make sure that the NSOs know that they're empowered.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. I mean, NSOs are empowered by default, but still, that word doesn't seem to have got around to everyone. And I've seen people who are convinced that unless they've been specifically told, NSOs can't call any penalties. So we've got the officials meeting. Sometimes might be a good chance to G people up a bit. Particularly if it's the third, fourth game of the day, people are flagging. Maybe people had a difficult game earlier. Maybe some of the crew are quite new and lacking confidence, or it's a good chance to try and G people up together. Try and build the team. Some people like to do a team chant. Some people hate doing a team chant. I see a question in the chat. Have you dealt with interleague or regional signals? Yeah, it's also a good chance to raise if there's any particular things that ways that you're used to communicating that are non-standard that you want to see whether that's going to happen for this crew. So some of there's various hand signals that seem to get used in some regions and not others, and it's not going to work if people don't know what they are. So it's a good chance to agree whether or not you're going to be using them for the game. So we've had the officials meeting. After try and have the officials meeting early enough that people have got a bit of time between that and the game. Some people like to warm up. Some people like to go off into a quiet corner and chill out, whatever they like to do. I'm not going to enforce anything on them, but I'll ask them to be ready at the track, perhaps sat in the penalty box or in some sort of designated area at the side at a particular time, often 5 minutes to go to Derby, so I can see that they're there and ready to go. Because I've certainly been at events before where it was just assumed people would be there on time, and the jam timers being ready to blow the whistle and hang on a minute, one of the refs is missing. And I want to keep a close eye on the clock at this point as well, because we've probably got hopefully we've agreed what time we're going to start the game, and I want to make sure that we start at that time unless there's a really good reason not to. And while it's not just on me as head ref to start the game, sometimes everyone's looking at the head ref and things can just drift if you're not keeping an eye on it and actually making sure things get started. Obviously, to start the game, I need to make sure that the officials are in place. So I'll ask the head NSO, are all the NSOs ready? I'll look around and check all the refs are ready, or ask them if it's convenient. And importantly, I need to check the medics are there and watching. Can't start the game if the medics aren't there. And I want to make sure the teams are reasonably ready. They've been told what time it starts. I'm not going to give them hours to do lengthy team chats, but yeah, I don't want to catch them really unawares if they're half of them are outside still. Let's let them know the game's about to start and we need them to get in. It's not about trying to catch the teams out. Great, so we're actually into the game now. Fantastic. So during the game, part of what I'm doing is IPRing. Part of what I'm doing is watching the pack. Part of what I'm doing is defining the pack, is spotting penalties and calling them. And that's important. And sometimes that takes a lot of my attention to get that done. Sometimes it might be things are pretty frantic. There's a huge number of penalties happening. The pack definition is horrible. I've got a very new front IPR, and that's basically taking all of my concentration. I can't do anything else, which is unfortunate, but that needs to happen. But if I've got the capacity, then I can do some other stuff as well. So I can, for example, I can be trying to keep a bit of an eye on how other people on the crew are doing. Does it look like they're in position? Does it look like they're making some calls? Do they seem to be appropriate calls? Is anyone on the crew not getting along? Someone mentioned in the chat about it. We like to think, officials, we're great. We all work really well together. Not necessarily. Some people have just got different ways of working. Might be difficult for them to work that out between themselves. I've met some officials who were dicks and were difficult to manage. I mean, obviously you're dick, Sparks, but for some reason I'm still happy to work with you. So, but yeah, there's so some people can be difficult to manage. Some people might need a bit of a closer eye keeping on them. Some people might need, might really benefit from some supportive comments. So if I've got the capacity, particularly between jams, sometimes I'll ask people, questions. How's it going? Or, that back block you called. Did you see the contact? And if they say yes, then great. Okay, I'm happy that they've seen the contacts and it's not a problem. But clearly, I'm asking it because I'm not sure whether they saw the contact. And if they say no, I didn't see it, then okay, we'll check. Did anyone else see any contact? And if not, we can reverse that. We can get the skater out of the box and take the penalty off. People make mistakes. There's no point in coming down really hard on someone for making a mistake. I want to make it as easy as possible for someone to admit a mistake and to correct it. So I want to support the crew as best I can. People might well have questions for me as well, particularly if they're quite new, they might want to ask questions. As far as possible, I'll try and get them to do it between jams because I've got other things to do during the jam. But sometimes it might be a really urgent question that they really feel like they need to ask me. I want to be as available as possible, as long as I know it's just for that really burning, urgent issue. I just saw this thing. Is that a penalty? I think it might be an expulsion. Then I'd like to know about it.
I think I've had a few issues, not issues, it's just kind of really difficult, like sometimes controlling other people's anxiety. I think I've worked with a few people, not massively recently, but that have been, oh God, I'm really new. Like, it's fine, concentrate what you're doing. But I think sometimes, and I'm thinking a particular person, it's not fair to say who it is, but where they literally just spend the whole game, I'm really sorry, and kind of just overthinking and they're very competent, they're quite new, but they're very good at what they do. And I think their kind of ability gets lost because they're overthinking the role so much. And I think I was in a position where I was head ref and they were jam reffing, and I literally just spent the whole game pretty much coaching them, going, just concentrate on what you're doing. And then I ended up having to like double up and kind of calling penalties for them as well, even though they were more than capable of calling them. So I think kind of managing other people in that way, from a kind of not a skill base, but sometimes from like an anxiety kind of confidence base as well, can be quite difficult. And no matter how much you tell, I know I'm terrible for it sometimes. I'll mutter and tutter and go, But I think just having that kind of getting that level of you're doing fine and letting it go and letting the game flow and get kind of building that confidence up with other people can be really hard sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a bit of positive feedback is always good. Just if you see someone do something good, they've made a call that might have been difficult, but I could see it as well. And I think that's spot on. Fantastic. I'll tell them good call. If I see, they fell over, but they kept their eyes on their jammer and were straight back up again. Great. Well done. Good job with that. It's always worth giving people positive feedback. I think if someone really needs a hell of a lot of support, then you've got to be realistic about how much you can do with that. Yes, you want to be supporting them, but if they're basically taking up all of your capacity for the game, is that something you can actually maintain during the game? Is that actually going to ruin your performance during the game if you're actually spending all of your time supporting them? It's a way that you can have that you can help them find a bit of support from elsewhere. Perhaps the other jam ref can offer them some support. Perhaps you can say to them, okay, let's take next 3 jams, just keep doing what you're doing. Let's check in after 3 jams. Maybe that's a way to help manage how often they're coming to you.
I'm just too nice.
Well, we know that.
Don't you say anything, Sparks.
I can never click unmute fast enough to respond.
No, go for it.
If you tap space, it temporarily unmutes your mic. See?
Yeah, just know. I'm really shocked that you weren't brave enough to say it was me and left it unnamed.
So
whatever.
So yeah, feedback about stuff. There's different types of feedback you can give, and feedback is great as an official. I love receiving feedback, except sometimes. Feedback's really useful. I want to be really open to feedback and hear the feedback, and then I'll decide how useful actually is that feedback. But equally, sometimes there's feedback that's just not helpful in that moment. So I'm not going to say to I'm not going to say to one of the referees halfway through the first half of a game, you really need to work on your skating skills, because they're not going to improve their skating skills in the course of that game. It's just going to put them off. It might be completely true. It might be a really beneficial thing for them to do, but there's no point in telling them in that moment.
I feel named and shamed again. All right.
Louis, skate backwards. Skate backwards. I'm on concrete.
So if I'm giving someone feedback, I want to think about, is it urgent? And is it something that they can actually act on? And if it's both of those things, then I'll try and give it to them in the course of the game. Perhaps I can just let them know in between jams, maybe even, if it's something that needs a bit more discussion, maybe we'll have to have a quick timeout to discuss it. But I don't want to be doing so much of that that overwhelm people, because they can only take so much on board. And actually, a lot of things aren't that urgent. Okay, so you made that call on that really obscure situation and you made the wrong call. Well, we'll sort it out. But then we don't then need to have a long discussion about how we'll deal with it if it happens again, because it's the first time I've seen it in 11 years. Whereas if, on the other hand, they're constantly calling false starts wrong, then we need to have an urgent chat about, okay, this is how I want you to call it. You've got the power to call timeouts. Obviously, any official can call a timeout, but often people will look to you as head ref. And so don't abuse it. Don't call too many timeouts just because you can. We want to keep things moving in the game, particularly if there's a crowd in. They're not going to appreciate it if we're constantly stopping. But make some reasonable decisions about when to call a timeout. If it's going to promote keeping the game fair or safe, that's when we need to have a timeout. We talked a bit about dealing with criticisms. You will get some benches who come into the middle a lot during games to tell you things. Some of those things will be not very worth their time letting me know. One thing I will say is that if I agree to them that I will do something, then I will do it. I've seen people who will try and get rid of benches by saying, oh, right, you want them to call more back blocks. Okay, I'll tell everyone to call more back blocks. And they don't do that, because that would be a stupid thing to do. But don't tell them you're going to do it if you're not actually going to do it. If they're coming in so much it's disruptive, then that's the time to have a chat with them and let them know what the issue is. And you can set, hopefully you've set some expectations earlier if you didn't, or if what they're doing is maybe within those expectations but is really putting things off, then this is the time to let them know and make sure that you have agreement on what is appropriate. And often you will be the target of complaints about everything that's happening on the crew with the officiating from those officials, from those benches. So don't take it personally. It's you're hearing a lot of it because you're head ref, and their complaints may or may not be well founded. Some people will say, oh, they're just complaining because they're unhappy, and maybe they are. Their team's losing, their jammer just got a penalty, they're unhappy. Maybe that's why, but maybe people are making mistakes. And it's some benches can do a really good job of identifying mistakes that have been made and come in and tell me about it. So I don't want to be defensive. I'm happy to listen to what they've got to say, as long as they're keeping it succinct and having that appropriate level of respect. I want to make sure that people are reasonably happy. The officials are reasonably happy. Hopefully they're very happy, but if we can get a bit of nice team spirit going during the game, fantastic. I want to, as far as I can, I'll keep talking to some NSOs as well. It's not just me talking to refs and perhaps the head NSO, although the head NSO is a really incredibly useful person, because you've got that. You've really got that working relationship with them, and if you want to pass something on to NSOs, or you want to, then they're often best placed to pass that on. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to talk to other NSOs. And everything's going really smoothly, and then we've got an official review.
Yay!
Yay! Fantastic! I'm glad you're so enthusiastic about official reviews. official reviews, they should be absolutely fine, but some people seem to get terrified by them. The first thing I would say about an official review is just because an official review is being called doesn't mean that somebody's fucked up. It might be someone fucked up, but equally it might be that it's being called speculatively, just in the vague hope that something might have gone wrong. The team might be hoping to get themselves out of a difficult situation. It might be that the team has misunderstood what's happened or a rule, and that's why they're calling it. And if someone did fuck up, well, everyone makes mistakes. We'll sort it out as best we can, and we'll move on. Yeah, review, chug water time, absolutely. Yeah, get some water. Every time out is a great opportunity to do that. But yeah, as head referee, I'm going to be responsible for making sure that official review runs smoothly. So the first thing that I'll do is I will make sure that the right people are at the official review meeting. So who do you think should be at the official review chat when the bench is, or perhaps the captain is telling us what the official review is about?
All the refs, including the alt.
I would always have all the
benches.
refs, including the alt there. Yep, there are some head refs who don't have the other refs there. I like to have them all. Sparks?
I do vary it sometimes depending on the situation, because if I've got a ref crew that has started to become intimidated by the benches, or a newbie bench, it might be intimidating for them to try and explain the entire story to an entire ref crew. So sometimes in certain situations, I will just myself and my head NSO go to the official review.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there are definitely a fair few head refs who do that. Personally, I'm always a fan of getting all the officials in, because I worry that if it's just me and it's a situation which I've not observed at all, I've got no knowledge about, I don't necessarily have enough information to be able to ask clarifying questions and pass it on to the officials. So
yeah, like I said, I would normally take the whole crew, but in certain situations, I will adapt to the environment and change down to a smaller OR.
And we've got some stuff in the chat as well. Head NSO, yes, 100%. Please have the head NSO there. And sometimes penalty lineup trackers and penalty wrangler. Okay, I wouldn't normally have them in the actual situation where the official review is being discussed, but there's certainly people we might need to talk to resolve the official review. There might be people we want to pull in. We want to check who was in that last jam, because we can't remember. We've agreed it was a penalty on the pivot, but we can't remember who the pivot was, or perhaps it could be any NSO could be helpful. This penalty happened right in front of the penalty box. None of the referees saw it. Did the penalty box manager see it? Let's ask them.
I think, just picking up what Mel's just said in the chat, I think when you get an official review and the team says something and one of the refs goes, "Oh yeah, I know that," and you're like, somebody jumps in and goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that."
Yeah. So
gone away and had the discussion yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would try and use language as best I can to keep things so that it's going to be the alternate most often, or potentially the captain of the team that's called the official review, who's talking, and anyone else who talks is just an official asking a question for clarification. So the reason why I don't like it being just me listening is because I've had a situation where, for instance, they talk about an action that happened on the outside that I didn't see. I've got no knowledge of at all. I come back to tell the other officials, and one of the OPRs said, "Oh yeah, was it the first or the second time that happened in quick succession?" And I have no idea. Important not to blurt out. Yeah, absolutely. That was wrong. I didn't see that. Yeah, no need to say it when the coaches are still there. Absolutely. Sometimes announcers like to listen in as well. I think that's fine as long as it's an announcer who I know is going to knows how this should work and isn't going to then go and tell the crowd about everything before we've had a chance to have a chat about it
And give an opinion.
Yeah. So then what I will do is I will ask the team, okay, what is it that they would like to review? That's the wording I like to use. You know, you might have slightly different wording you like to use, but I want to make sure that they definitely tell me about the specific thing that we're going to talk about, because there are some benches who will try and waste time by talking at length about things that aren't related to the subject of the official review, because their main purpose is for their team to have a long breather.
On that note, I have had some just say, I do just want to use this official review as a timeout. It's like, okay, everyone go get some water.
Absolutely fine. That's great. If they tell me that straight away, that's a nice way to do it. It's if they do, then they don't even need to, we don't need to have the whole huddle for them to tell me that. Even they can let me know that before we've even got everyone inside. Sometimes you might get people who try to do something that isn't allowed in an official review. So they might want to have a general complaint that's not about any specific situation. They need to ask about something specific which we could change. They might want to ask about more than one thing, in which case I will tell them that they need to let us know which one thing they want us to review. There may be a chance to discuss other things just as there is in between other jams anyway, but the official review needs to be about one specific thing. And then what I like to do, once we've got the information, is ask the benches and captains to stick around in the middle, because if they go back to their benches, it then takes ages to get them back into the middle again when we've got a decision. But I will take the officials who are there, so the referees and the head NSO, over to a different section in the middle where we can't be overheard, so that we can have an honest conversation. Hopefully people feel, it could be someone's made a very silly mistake and would be embarrassed to be overheard by the benches saying that they did it. And then usually the first question that I will ask when I've got the officials there is, who saw this? Because I want to keep the conversation focused on what people actually saw. I don't need people telling me they didn't see it. That's fine. If they don't say anything, they didn't see it. I don't need people speculating about things that might have happened that they didn't see. And we don't necessarily need a chat about the details of the rules, although it might be if we're not all in agreement on how we should interpret the rules. And I want to keep things moving, and I want to have this official review as quickly as possible. So we need to make sure that everyone who's actually got something useful to contribute has a chance to say, and that we arrive at decision. But I don't want to waste time, because we're holding the game up. If we've got a crowd in particular, they're not enjoying just watching us all huddled in the middle having a chat. So we want to get it resolved as quickly as we can. As a guide, I would say if it's taking you more than 3 minutes to have your official review, that's too long. Ideally, it'll be a fair bit quicker than that. There might be occasions where you've got a really complex situation, different people saw different aspects of it, and a bit like a jigsaw, you can eventually piece together enough, and you'll quickly get an idea of whether it's that, or whether actually it's just people saying, oh, I didn't really see it. I thought it might have been a back block, but I didn't see it, so I didn't call it. I don't need to know that. And then once I'm clear what the decision is, then I'll go back and tell the teams. And I don't need to give them an absolute ton of detail. I just need to tell them what the decision is and maybe a brief reason why. But I'm not going to go into a load of detail. I'm certainly not going to throw anyone under the bus. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, sorry, the OPR is really new and they fucked it up. That's not going to benefit anyone. So usually if it's usually I can just communicate it really quickly and clearly, and just say, none of the officials saw that action, so your official review is not retained. Or on review, yes, we agree that there was a scoring trip which was not counted, and so we're going to add those extra 4 points to the scoreboard. Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Sherry. Yep, absolutely. Make sure that somebody's feeding it back to the scoreboard operator and to the penalty tracker if there's a penalty being issued, and it can be quite helpful to feed it back even if there's not, because the penalty tracker may be wondering, and if no one's told them, just be thinking, has there been one or not? And also it might be quite helpful for someone to tell the announcers if they've not been there all along, so that they can let the crowd know, because if you've got a crowd in, because people will be wondering, what's this all about, what's the decision, and the announcers would love to be able to tell them. And this is a point where we can tell them. So then we'll make any corrections that we need to, and we'll move on. Official review done, everyone reasonably happy. Occasionally you can feedback, and the benches are really unhappy and want to tell me about why we got the decision wrong. And if they're trying to do that, I will cut them off and let them know that we need to get back to play because we've had quite long enough. We've had our decision, so there's no point in them telling me further why we're wrong. Sparks.
Sorry, we're just waving at each
other.
Oh,
we're just waving goodbye.
Oh. Yeah, we need to go.
I need my beauty sleep.
Great. Well, I think we're just about done anyway. So I was just going to cover two final things, which are tied games and after the game. So tied games hardly ever come up. People start to panic if they think there might be a tied game. What I like to do is, if we've got a timeout and it's near the end of the game, to have a quick glance at the scoreboard and think, could this realistically be a tied game? If so, I'm going to communicate to the officials, to the referees at least, what we will do if there's a tied game. It's the same every time, but I want to make sure that everyone's clear on that, so that if it is a tied game, we're not then panicking. We had one at the Five Nations tournament earlier this year, so yeah, very, very rarely we have one. And the main difference is that there's no lead jammer, so the scoring's from the initial trip through the pack, and it's very important that the jam refs know that. So we finished the game. Fantastic. We got through it at this point. Some people like to stick around in the middle, do the thanks, to have the sweaty hugs. Some people hate it and want to get straight out of there. Do what you like to do. I will try and tell the crew what I'm doing, because they might want to follow my lead, but they don't have to. If I want to get out away from the sweaty hugs and they really want them, they can have them. If it is a sanctioned game or one that's part of certain types of tournament, like the Five Nations tournament in the UK and Ireland, then there will be an IGRF form to sign, and that's the head NSO's responsibility. But it's quite easy to forget, and so I will try and remind the head NSO about it. And it's also, I want to make sure that I thank as many people as possible, particularly the officials, for what they've done. And if people have asked for feedback, I generally won't give it to them straight after the game, because people usually are busy with other stuff and not necessarily in a headspace. They want to hear feedback immediately, but I can let them know that if they'd like feedback, I'm happy to give it to them at a later date. And if they wouldn't like feedback, that's fine. Sometimes people just aren't ready to hear feedback that they're concerned about. If they've got anything to say beyond, yeah, good job, you did a good, had a good game, or we got through it, well done. I'm not going to force people to hear that. I'd encourage people to take feedback. It's a really positive thing. Your head NSO doesn't let you run. Okay, well.
Yeah, my head NSO also happens to be my best friend, so I'm not allowed to run away from before signing paperwork. Like, I will get threatened with violence.
Yes, expulsion paperwork. I've not mentioned expulsion paperwork, but again, if it's a sanctions game or one that's part of an event like Five Nations, then there will be an expulsion meeting with anyone who's been expelled. So, yeah, I've not really talked about that, but I would say the main things about the expulsion meeting is make sure that all the right people know that it's where it's going to happen and when, so that they're there. And try and manage the meeting. The form itself gives you quite a good order of things to go through to make sure that you cover everything. Try and give everyone a chance to have their say and get it recorded. Oh, see you, Zoe. Bye. Yeah, try and give everyone a chance to have their say and record that. Each person, when you get to their section of the form, it's their chance to have their say of their view about the expulsion. It may be someone else strongly disagrees with it. That's their prerogative, but we're not going to have a debate. Cool. We've got through the game day. That is a day of head reffing. Anyone got any final thoughts before we all chill out for the rest of the evening?
Nope, I got my tacos. I'm happy.
Yeah, we got to see the whole preparation for process. So it was great.
I mean, the meat's been cooking for about 6 hours, so you haven't seen the full.
Awesome.
It's right, if any of you guys ever come down Portsmouth way for reffing, if it's a weekend, I'll cook for you. Don't you worry.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you never know. I grew up in near Guildford, so I might, if I'm down there sometime when you got a game on, it might work out perfectly.
I'll let people know when I've got open doors now.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I hope it was useful. It's certainly useful for me. Really good chat and lovely to see everyone.
You too. Thank you very much.
Bye.
See ya.
Cheers.